Upfront and Outspoken with Bob Williams. If you love the Constitution,
man is not free unless government is limited.
If you love freedom,
as government expands, liberty contracts.
If you believe in personal responsibility, if you believe America is still the greatest nation on earth, then get ready for an experience you'll never forget. This is Upfront and Outspoken. Here's your host, Bob Williams.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
And good morning and welcome back to Upfront Outspoken. Of course, I'm your host, Bob Williams. I want to give you guys all a program note before I bring on my guests. Next week, folks, next week, I am going to be turning the heat up in Savannah. That's right. On Monday, O.C. Welsh will be joining me. On Wednesday, mayoral candidate Murray Silver will be joining me. And then on Thursday, private investigator John Perry will once again be joining me. And I also want to make it very clear right here, right now. We did invite Alderman Tony Thomas to come on air and address the allegations levied against him. But guess what? He proved how spineless and gutless he really is. He refuses to come on my show. Well, Alderman, I'm going to be calling you out next week with facts, figures, and including a police report you tried to bury. That's right. It didn't work, Alderman. I've got it. All right, I'm bringing now on to the show, of course, host of the Fred Brauer Report, Fred Brauer, and, of course, Jonathan Wolfman of Passionate Justice. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, everybody out there from a very cold Washington, D.C.
Well, it's not that much warmer here this morning, Jonathan. What can I tell you? Yeah, I want to get right into things. You know, we've all heard about Jihad John has now been identified as indeed a Londoner. And I don't know if you guys heard me earlier. I had a segment from the Ed Schultz show in which it seems our government doesn't want to go after this guy, but are more inclined to argue about funding for our own homeland security. And I want to get each of you guys' opinion on this, and I want to first start with Fred. You know, what do you think there, Fred?
I think John and I are in agreement on this one. It's, you know, the using the DHS to hijack this process is ridiculous. It's, there needs to be 2 green pills sent up.
Yeah, we can
go for it from there.
That's right. Fred's right on that. I mean, we can and will disagree on all sorts of aspects of immigration. At the same time, Peter King, a well-respected New York Republican congressman, put it right. He doesn't understand what planet some of his fellow Republican congressmen live on if they really, really think that it's a bright idea, either both in terms of morality or politics, to tie funding for our national security so that they can have a hissy fit over what they consider an overreach, which may or may not be the case, by the president as far as immigration is concerned. This is nuts. This is plain nuts.
You know, the one thing, I mean, everybody out there that listens to my show knows. They know my stance is regarding immigration. And while I do not agree with the fact that these guys are indeed trying to attach this rider to override the president's executive order, you know, I do believe we do need to fund the DHS, but they're only talking, we're going to go ahead and fund it for 3 weeks. So I'm going to ask either one of you, do you honestly think that if a clean bill goes to the president's office funding DHS for 3 weeks, they're going to resolve this in that period of time, given our current Congress?
Of course not.
No, not in the House. No, not in the House. You have a group of people, more than a few score of people, 60, 70, 80, who are in very safe, very conservative districts, who know very well that they can vote to punish people for doing what peoples have been doing for the history of the world, and that is trying to get into places that are more economically advantageous to their families back home. And should we have a way to do it that is reasonable and rational and not haphazard as it is now? You bet. But the Congress, the House of Representatives in particular, unlike the Senate, which voted, which could have come to a House-Senate joint compromise committee, they won't even put an immigration bill on the floor, and yet they're willing to compromise our national security because of, as I say, this idiotic hissy fit.
Now, Fred, I know you've got some very, very strong feelings in reference to the immigration, and I know, probably you and I are probably going to agree on much of it. So, give me your take on the current immigration that President Obama, with this executive order, give me your take on what, in your view, is actually going to happen.
Well, even before I can answer that question, I got a few other points that I have to make about immigration. First, number one, John is right. You're not going to deport 12 million people, okay? That's not going to happen. Two, the first thing that should have been done a long time ago and has never been done, the border has never been properly secured. And the thing is, in relation to DHS, the border is not just an immigration issue. It is a security issue. And this administration has compromised the effectiveness of security on that border time and time again. He has handed down, orders and restrictions on what these border agents can do. Now, in relation to DHS, the FBI and the DHS have already identified ISIS and Islamic cells in Mexico and South America. And it's not rumor, it's fact. They are there. So you have to tackle that problem first. Our federal government has oversight on dozens and dozens of departments, but they don't manage this one properly. There needs to be a, hold on, I'm almost done. Sure. There has to be a well-managed immigration policy where, just like a lot of other countries, you can't just walk into Canada. They want to know everything about you before you go there. We have to do the same thing. Every immigrant has to be properly screened, and our federal government has to reserve the right to say, no, you can't come in. Yeah, you can, though. I mean, if you got a criminal record, no, you can't come in.
I'll tell you what I think sometimes. I think sometimes that we mistakenly, just because of someone's title, let's say like congressman, we give them an automatic well of respect, some percentage of respect. The idea that if there are, let's say Fred's absolutely right. Let me stipulate that there are, Al-Qaeda and ISIS cells in Mexico itching to get into El Paso and then work their way north and destroy all sorts of people and institutions. Let's just say, that's true for a moment. Why in the world would we hold an ounce of respect for a group of, say, 120 congresspeople who are so rabidly anti-Brown that they would be willing to compromise the border security of the United States, having already declared that the president doesn't care about border security? They want to, double down on not caring about border security because they just don't like the way this president, as they put it, overreaches? Why in hell do we have respect for someone just because he has the name congressperson? It's nuts.
The one thing that came up during Ed's show today was the fact that since President Obama has taken office, the expenditures towards DHS indeed went up by some $1 billion. But the thing that really disturbs me on this entire immigration, and my stance on it is very clear. It's on the record time and time again. I honestly believe if you are illegally here in the United States, your ass ought to be picked up, shipped right back where you came from until you can come through legally. That's been my stance. And I have caught in a lot of flack for it, and I'm not going to say I haven't, but I'm always going to be a firm believer that if you came into this country illegally, you are undocumented in this country, ship your ass back until you get it right.
But, I'll tell you, Bob, here's why that doesn't happen, on my view, and other people will have other views. The reason that doesn't happen is not simply a numbers question. People say, how are you going to round up 12 million people? Okay, I understand that, but it's deeper than that. And Fred and I were chatting about it during the news. And that is this. Many, many, many American businesses don't want that to happen. It's not simply some bleeding hearts out there, people who, okay, yeah, I'm a progressive, and that's right, and I'm proudly so, and Fred's proudly what he is, and that's just fine. But it's the business community that has been telling the Republican Party, we don't want you rounding up these 12 million people because we can employ them at far lower rates and jobs that a lot of Americans won't do, and if they had to do them, already citizens had to do them, they'd be demanding higher wages. And that's been going on since before the last immigration reform in the 80s.
Yeah, but here's the point to that, Jonathan. You brought up the fact that employers are kind of looking the other direction, paying them lower wages. That they're already breaking the law the second they take one of these people's in. I mean, you've got to have a Social Security card. You've got to have a, identification. Granted, some of these guys out there are probably getting them illegally. They're fraudulent. But it's the businessman whose responsibility it is to verify that these numbers are legit. These people are indeed documented. I mean, you've got to have a visa. You got to have a green card. These businesses know that by hiring these illegals, they are indeed breaking the law. So
I agree with you.
I have no sympathy.
When have you heard of a prosecution of a business for doing that? You haven't.
Well, you can't say that. Look at Leona Helmsley. Now she was. Now I know
sure, because she's extremely high profile. But and you're right. And you're right. So when I say you haven't, I'm exaggerating. You're totally correct to correct me there. But the long and the short of it, is it not true that unless you're a very high-profile employer who the media already dislikes and they couldn't stand Leona, the Queen of New York,
right?
Unless you're a person like Leona Helmsley, the government doesn't go after those employers typically. Isn't that right?
But the question is, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't our government, crack down on this? I mean, we've heard it over and over again coming out of Congress that they are pro-security, they are pro-this, pro-that, but yet they're sitting there with their finger up their ass and doing nothing.
But they're also pro-business. And that I think sometimes trumps everything. And it's interesting when being pro-business can trump pro-security.
All right, Fred, let's hear your side.
Well, a couple things have to. First of all, for the federal government to even if they could put together an agency to go after every business that is hiring illegals and paying them cash under the table would be an overwhelming task. And I have witnessed this with my own eyes, being in Southern California, being in Florida, being in Texas, with large Hispanic communities. I mean, you can go to any Home Depot in Southern California, 6 o'clock in the morning, and there's a couple hundred illegals standing there waiting for the contractors to pull in so they can jump on their trucks and get paid cash for that day. And that's happening in millions of places all over the country. Yeah, but so it's a daunting task. But
Fred is totally right about that. Let me just quickly put in here that my son at one point when he was younger, worked at a Home Depot doing overnight unloading of lumber off trucks. He was probably one of 5% of the guys who were doing that unloading who were actual American citizens.
Right.
And Home Depot knew it. Everybody knew it.
Okay, but
I
here's
have an answer, though.
But here's the question, though, is, like you said, Fred, this is going on in Southern California. It's known to be a
Texas, Florida.
Right. It's known to be a ongoing issue. So if we know where these people are congregating, okay, why can't we have immigration there?
Then what do?
Let's deport these sons of a bitches. They don't deserve to be here.
You're talking millions and millions of illegals. How many agents are you going to pay $50 or $60 or $70,000 a year? How many agents do you need? It's there's an easier fix.
Okay, go ahead.
There is an easier fix. Legislation has to be passed. First of all, like I said before, you got to close that border.
Right.
You got to secure it properly.
Why?
There has to be no point at that border where someone can simply walk across and walk in. The second thing that has to happen is there must be legislation drafted. You have to document these people. Give them Social Security cards. Give them IDs. Every state has a DMV. Every state has a Social Security office. Every county has a Social Security office, I think. And you got to document these people. And then,
Yeah, certainly the counties up here in Maryland do. Fred's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is not hard. You give every illegal in the country, give them 6 months to report to their local DMV, and you give them 6 months to report to the Social Security Administration, get their Social Security card, get their ID, and then be done with it.
Yeah,
and then from then on...
Wait a minute, Fred. Isn't Bob going to ask you, and I'll ask you, and Bob, you'll tell me if this is not on your mind too. So what happens when so many of them who are afraid that it's some kind of ruse to get them to show their faces, they go, they're not going to, a huge percentage are not going to show up and get that card. What do you do after 6 months?
Well, before you even do it, you get the president to put his face on television like Ronald Reagan used to do and talk to the American people.
There.
This is what we're going to do. This is going to be the law.
That's the thing. And I'm glad you brought this up, Fred. Okay, and Jonathan, I gotta kind of rephrase your question a little bit, but you did get a very good point. So yes, we do need to get President Obama out there to say, hey, this is not a ruse. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. But what we're hearing from Congress in the current, because of President Obama signing this executive order, they're contending that what he did in reality was grant amnesty, and that is the sticking point with the GOP. They don't want these people to have amnesty. And, I have to, in some ways, I have to agree with the fact that it appears, and I'm going to leave it at that, it appears that with this executive order, that is exactly what he is doing. He is granting them amnesty. My contention is if they do indeed want to become citizens of the United States, and they are illegal aliens, go through the proper channels, and as Jonathan said, and as you said, Fred, give them a period of time to go to the nearest DMV, go down to the Social Security office, get registered, get your Social Security card, but make it a probationary period. If you do not follow through with getting your documentation filed, we're going to come after you. I mean,
and there has to be another factor added to that legislation.
Okay, which would be,
and that's after that 6 months period. Okay, if you have not gotten your 2 forms of ID, you also have to pass legislation that you have to criminalize hiring an illegal immigrant.
But
you have to criminalize that.
Isn't that already in legislation? I mean, businesses are fined. They can risk, jail terms if they hire an illegal, if they're caught knowingly hiring an illegal.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean, that
yeah,
was my
yeah.
point about 10 minutes ago. I mean, it is in under almost every circumstance already illegal, and the government has almost, and Bob, you corrected me and you were right, but the government has almost never, in any systematic way, had the desire. It's not even a question of sack or balls, and of course it's that too, but they've never even had the desire, they've never had the interest in going after them.
But this
The
is what has
businesses.
to happen. This is what has to happen. This needs to be made a public issue. It needs to be brought out of the closet, slammed on the table, and it needs to be put on in public view by the president that we are going to criminalize anyone that hires an illegal after this 6 months.
Do you think the
This is all poor
Fred, do you think
management.
Congress,
Well,
do you think the business community would stand for a moment of having a, let's say, what you're really talking about is what the Chinese government does on TV. They raise up businesses every night on their TV for shaming, for not following the law and everything like that. Do you think that the business community would tolerate the government doing that for 5 seconds?
that's
Tolerate
in my
the
opinion.
government demanding that they follow the law. It's
Yeah,
against
they-
the law. It's
yeah,
against
they-
the law to walk into this country and work for some company for cash under the table.
Okay,
That's not China.
You think you think the business roundtable, you think the largest corporations who get away with hiring by the thousands these people, the as far north in Bob's old part of the country, the Midwest, these slaughterhouses in Iowa hiring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of illegal workers, and the only reason that the slaughterhouse guy there got put in jail was because some of the kickbacks he was getting from his own employers went to unbelievably lavish stuff for himself, and the government couldn't ignore it after a point.
Well, let me ask.
I'm just forgetting the guy's name. I think his name was Rothenberg.
Well, let me ask you this. All right, here's the thing. All right, and I'm gonna once again pull back, memory from something my personal experiences. Several years ago, my wife worked for a company called Allen Canning here up here in Van Buren, Arkansas, and she got injured on the job. Okay, I'm gonna leave it at that. And what happened next suddenly made me realize that even Allen Canning must have illegals in her, because at first, because of her injury, they were not going to let her go to the nearest hospital to have it checked out. She had a very serious burn on her hand.
Oh,
But
man.
the second I threatened to get immigration in there, the cops in there, to escort an ambulance in there, all of a sudden, oh yeah, we'll let her go home. We'll let her go home. The thing that is disturbing is we know certain companies. I mean, you can't tell me immigration doesn't know certain companies have these pools of illegals working there and are not doing anything about it, first off. Second off, I believe, like Fred was saying, why not shame these companies that are doing it? I don't care. The American public needs to know that there is something being done, and if you have to shame them like you did Leona Helmsley, do it, for Christ's sake.
I'm not disagreeing with you, not one bit. Shame them, sure, absolutely. I'm saying to you that I think maybe you and Fred are underestimating what I think would be an immediate and overwhelming pushback to that shaming from the business community itself that puts these congressmen in their jobs.
Oh yeah, there would be. I'm not going to say there isn't, Jonathan. I mean, there would be immediately a pushback. Okay, I'm not going to say there isn't, but we need to get, like Fred said, this needs to be out in the open. This needs to be brought on the table to tell the American people, hey, look, this is what's going on with these illegal immigrants in here. It's taking jobs away from you. You need to stand up and say enough is enough.
Well, and they're not paying taxes.
Exactly.
They're not paying taxes. I mean, I listen. My wife and I were in Southern California for months and months and months. I mean, they'll put 20 people in one house, and they're all making like a couple $100, cash a week, and then their rent, it's like a tiny fraction of their cash under the table goes to rent because they got so many people in one house. I mean, a lot of them are doing pretty well because nothing comes out of their check. It just goes right into their pocket. And believe me, a lot of them are not working for just $5 an hour. But I want to address the shame word. It's not. I don't know where the shaming businesses is coming from. The fact is, the federal government and the President of the United States need to stand up in there and say, okay, look, I know it's been happening for this time, but this is going to stop. Everybody that works in the United States has to have an ID and a Social Security card. That's it. If you hire an illegal immigrant, you are breaking the law, and there's going to be consequences for it. It's not shaming. You're telling American businesses they have to follow the law. You cannot. It's illegal to hire an illegal immigrant, and you're going to be fined for it, and fined big.
Well, the thing is, what the how the shaming got, in fact, Fred, and maybe I should clarify this, is if indeed you go after the business, number one, it's going to be a matter of public record that this business is now under investigation for these allegations. And if proven, they're going to be, say they're found guilty in court, it becomes open record. Then this, once it's been part of open record, it's accessible to anyone. And
but the thing is, if you made it law, believe me, you'd be shaming thousands of them. Because thousands of them would reject the law, and they would get caught. So when you're shaming thousands of them, a lot of businesses, then everybody's sharing the same shame, okay? You're not just going to look at Procter & Gamble at Walmart. There's going to be a long freaking list.
Oh, yeah. Great.
And everybody, the shaming is going to get diluted in the numbers, okay?
So take a look just take Walmart for a moment. And Walmart, as we know, has political influence well beyond its home state of Arkansas. Now, do you think if Walmart were singled out, or a company with anywhere near its clout,
or even Home Depot,
whether you call it shaming or not, how long do you think it would last before the lawyers and lobbyists flooded the offices in not only in Washington but the capital cities of these states, and just ordered them shut it down, or our political contributions dry up tomorrow?
Well, some blood's got to be shed.
Yeah, exactly.
How?
That's the way I see it. This is the problem with D.C. right now. It has no guts. It has no
Fred,
guts.
This situation we've been talking about. This situation we've been talking about for 35 minutes has been the precise same situation that's been going on throughout my lifetime.
And it's never been addressed.
That's right. It's never been addressed. It's not simply the Reagan administration that didn't really address it. The Bush, the Clinton, the Obama, none of them have addressed it. And I think it's because the business community is so powerful, regardless of whether it's Dems or reps in Washington controlling things, that they know what the story is. They know what the deal is.
Well, let me interject here, guys, because we're going to find out that we can all agree on one thing. We can agree to disagree on this very issue, but I want to change gears here in the last few minutes, in that, as everyone is also aware, and I believe it was yesterday, the FCC chairman came out and flatly said that they are now going to be treating the internet like a utility. And I want to hear from both sides of you, the pros and cons about the fact that this is now going to be regulated as a utility.
It'll be the federal government's new cash cow.
Jonathan?
Well, here's my sense of it. You're going to get two different reactions. The companies that put information on the internet, like, say, Google, Facebook, they love it. The people who will hate it are the Comcasts, AOLs, that is, the people who are what are called ISP providers. What the FCC decided to do yesterday was to underscore the idea that the internet, like your electricity company, is a public utility. You can invest in it, but here's what they now can't do. What they wanted, what the people who are angry about the decision, the corporations like Comcast, what they wanted was to be able to create fast lanes and slow lanes, such that if you were to pay more and more and more and more, you could get quicker and better and more extensive access to the internet. And what it would do is set up, and rather swiftly, a very clear caste or class system on the internet, such that people like the three of us, there's no reason to think that the three of us would end up wanting to pay 3, 4, 5 times what we're paying now for internet access, whether it's from Comcast, or I say Comcast because I simply use it, and I have no choice for various reasons but to use Comcast. But the point is, it will set up a class system such that only the upper middle class, and really the upper part of the upper middle class and the upper class, will have what they want to get out of the internet, and the rest of us will get nothing.
Well, we already are seeing a pushback by companies such as Verizon, Comcast, and others. You know, when this was going on, they did indeed want it. They wanted to be able to make the fast lane, like you said, because their contention is they're not going to be able to get the investors they need to upgrade their facilities, to do more technological advancements. This is the contention that is now going on with Verizon, Comcast, and others.
And I don't believe it.
Right. I find it hard to believe myself. But the question is, it is now part of the regulations, which is now it's being governed as a utility. Do either of you see, as I see, these major corporations saying, look, I think the FCC outstepped their own guidelines, and let's challenge it in court? Or do you see these guys saying, all right, this is it, we can't do anything? I mean,
I think they absolutely will challenge it in court. But I know I've said a lot, but let me just say this last thing. I made the analogy with the electric company. I would ask everybody out there this: if the electric grid had fast lanes and slow lanes, would you want to be a part of the slow lane that maybe got optimal electricity 3 out of 5 business days, or 4 out of 7 weekdays, and then you had slow electricity or dull electricity? You know what? You'd be living in places like, it would be as if you were living in places with the kind of electric grid like Pakistan, but that's not because they have fast and slow lanes in Pakistan or China, but because it's crappy electricity. I think that we don't want that with our internet.
No.
Well, that was a quick answer, Fred. No.
No.
The thing is I have to agree. In my opinion, I agree it needed to be regulated. I agree it had to be under a public utility, confirmed as a public utility, because I've firsthand experience around here is that if you are a business, say, then you have the ability to get a better internet system than the average customer. In fact, the company that we use, Crosstel, they have different plans. You have Plan A, it's a real slow speed. Plan B, it's a next speed, and Plan C. Now, with it being governed like a utility, is it going to force all these even smaller cable companies to say, okay, guess what? We screwed up. We have to provide everyone with the exact same speed. We can no longer charge for special packages.
I think they'll be able to charge for special content packages, like special sports packages or special entertainment packages. I still think they will be, say, basic cable TV.
No, but what I'm talking about, Jonathan, is internet speed. Now,
I see. If you're just talking about internet speed, I think you're right that they're gonna have a problem. You know, when I first signed on to Comcast, I chose to have a business account and pay a little more in order to get service quickly, because if anybody out there is with Comcast, and I'm sure it's true with Verizon or others, if you have a problem and you need a guy to come out and they look up and say, see, you just have a residential account, man, oh man, could they not care less about your ass? And that's just the truth.
And you're right. You're right, and I'm proof positive, because we have on one set of computers, we have what is called the gold package here, and if we call in to technical support, they say that, oh, we're going to write a ticket up. In fact, they wrote a ticket up. I'm going to try to think, Monday, I believe. Today's Friday. And we have yet to hear back. So you're right. As far as a residential, they're kind of like they don't give a they could care less as long as they get their money. Screw you. Okay,
that's absolutely right.
Okay, but what I'm referring to is now that this is classified, the internet is now a utility. Will that force the internet providers to rethink and retool the speed of the internet towards both residential and businesses? Are residents going to be able to say, look, you cannot deny me the same speed you offer to businesses?
I think if they're smart, what the ISPs will do, these providers, they will find ways to make it attractive, really attractive to ordinary folks like the three of us and like 99% of our listeners out there, to want to spend a little more per month to get some premium. I think that's what they'll be forced to do, and I would consider it, and I think all three of us would consider it. What we don't want to consider is the notion that 6 months, 18 months down the line, we're in some third class of citizenry as far as internet access and utility is concerned.
What do you think on that, Fred?
I'm really not sure. I mean, I'll say this. Name one thing that the government regulates properly.
Well,
every time the government gets involved, I get scared.
Well, the thing is, the one thing we got to admit that the government gets right is doing nothing. So they're regulating themselves that way pretty good, I think.
Well, they do Medicare pretty damn well.
I mean, even that's debatable. Yeah, I was just going to say that's extremely.
I'd tell my wife that.
Yeah, that's like the ongoing silver bullet of Obamacare.
I thought that would get you. I knew that would get you guys going.
Oh yeah, I know. But the thing is we're as consumers, we want the ability to get on the internet, to be able to surf the internet with as fast of a speed as possible. But yet it seems that these companies like Comcast, Verizon, here, Crostel, I don't know who Fred has, but every single one of these internet providers, as Jonathan, you brought up yourself, is that they have a package for their internet speeds. You could either get the basic, the gold, the platinum, whatever the hell they want to call them. But it seems if you look at these packages, your upload speed and download speed vary for each one. But now with net neutrality and the regulations that are going to be taking effect, that it's going to be classified as a utility, will the lower packages suddenly disappear, or are you still going to be stuck with, if you want faster speed, you got to pay for a higher rate? I mean, like you said, Jonathan, that's the same thing as saying, with the power grid. Do I want faster electricity served to my home? Do I want it 7 days a week at the same speed?
You want to be able to flush your toilet only 4 days a week or 7.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'd rather have the 7. I mean,
Me too.
Yeah, but the thing is that these current cable companies and internet providers all provide a package, specifically for the internet. You can get, say, 4 gig, or you can get 1, or 0.75, speed. But now that it's a utility, are they not mandated to say, look, we have to provide this, it has to be equal for everybody, and this is all we can charge? Did this not, in fact, say you can't have these packages anymore? You are now mandated to maintain this level.
My guess is that they're going to be mandated to maintain a certain level of speed and access that is very similar to what we see right now. But I have a feeling, and I would have to look at the more law and the decision of the FCC more carefully, but my guess is they're still going to be able to offer certain speeds, especially to businesses.
What do you think, Fred?
I think John's probably right. I think they're going to have to. I mean, a big business is going to need a much better internet than John Q sitting in his living room. It's the one size. How is a one-size-fits-all approach going to work?
Well, what I'm saying
with different.
What I'm,
I probably don't know enough about it. I've been busy with other things, and I'm still researching this issue.
Okay.
It's a little complex to me.
Yeah, I can understand it, but what I'm.
But I will say this: the one size fits all, it never works with anything else, and it normally lowers quality and raises prices.
Well, what I'm referring to by the one size fits all, I'm talking about the average American, the John Doe who goes to work 40 hours a week. I'm not referring to businesses where businesses, do have the right to determine, I want to pay extra for this. But I'm talking John Q. Public. Will John Q. Public notice a difference, or are they going to stay the same, and all of a sudden they're going to see, because it's now a utility, we can raise our rates?
Yeah, but no,
but they were always able to raise their rates.
Yeah, but it wasn't regulated as a utility. It was regulated as simply a company doing business. Now, if it's a utility...
That's right. Yeah, sure. But the thinking of the FCC is that if you regulate it as a utility, whatever rate increases are put forward, they're not going to be utterly subject to the whims of these few semi-monopolistic ISPs.
But here's a question too, okay? If I don't know how it is with you, Jonathan, and I don't know how it is with you, Fred, but anytime a public service or a utility, like the power company, the water company, they decide we need to increase our rates, they have to go in front of what is called the Public Service Commission in order to address this. Will the new legislation do the same with the internet?
I think so, but I can't say for sure. It's an interesting thing. I told you guys I had Comcast, and I also mentioned that I have no other choice, and that's not because of the government, but because the corporation And it's a good corporation that owns my building that I live in. It's one of the largest builders of apartment complexes in the United States. It's called Forest City. They're very, very good. They have apartment, tall building communities all over the United States. But Forest City has an arrangement with Comcast. And so whatever my neighbor, I'm looking across the street, he may have Verizon, he may have Cox, but the fact is I am locked in personally to Comcast, not because some government agency is telling me to get Comcast, but because a private corporation made a deal with Comcast and said, okay, you want to live in this building? Yes, and that's my choice. I do. I like this building very much. But I have no choice but to have Comcast. And so, therefore, it seems to me that what the FCC did yesterday gives me some small degree of leverage, since I didn't have much choice about having Comcast in any case.
Well, here in Oklahoma, especially where we are located in Callington, Crosstel knows that you could get, what is it, that Dish, you could get, I keep forgetting, a couple of other companies. However, they have this entire area monopolized. I mean, I've made contact with AT&T, I made contact with Verizon, I've contacted a couple of other providers, and they're saying, no, we cannot go in there because Crosstel has locked us out. They are Crosstel basically holds a monopoly on this area.
There's a lot of that.
Will this?
Yeah, and the point is that whether or not it's the government forcing you to do something like that, or whether it's private business, a private corporation, in America we seem to think, well, it's more or less okay if the private corporation is forcing you into a position that you're uncomfortable with, but it's next to devilish if the government's doing that.
But will this net neutrality that is now classified a utility break down those walls and afford John Q. Public the ability to decide for himself which company he wants, or is he going to still be stuck with the same providers and the same monopoly that is ongoing?
I would hope so, although I'm not so hopeful about it. The thing about what you're really saying, Bob, is that what we really want is the capitalist ideal, and that is competition, because competition, at least in theory, gives you the best price and the best service. But when you have corporations working with governments to carve out, like the Chicago mob, areas of control, then that is anti-capitalistic. That's why monopolies are no good, because they are anti-capitalistic.
Comment, Fred?
Yeah, I agree. This is the worst thing you can do is to remove competition, and you can apply that to any product.
Exactly.
Apply it to pizza. What if there was only one kind of pizza you could sell in the United States? How would you charge more for that pizza in Detroit than you charge for it in Chicago? You take away. It's like I said before. You remove the quality, and inadvertently the price always goes up. So quality goes down and the price goes up when you remove the competition.
Fred's right.
All right, so let me see if I got this correctly. All right, now with net neutrality becoming a utility, it's going to backfire on Verizon and Comcast, and I'm going to say backfire in the sense that they know that it's going to be more competitive. Therefore, their contention that they're not going to be able to draw the money in to advance technologically is really a falsehood that the American people are being sucked into.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's. I would tend to say yes.
Okay. All right, gentlemen. This is getting good. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and this net neutrality is something we all need to take concern of. And once again, guys, I want to thank you for coming on here. I want you to stick around for a couple of minutes because I got to, give all my listeners a program though for next week. So hang on for a minute, everybody. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you, coming up next week, Savannah, Georgia, you are on the hot seat again. Yeah, I'm not done with you. I am far from done with you. And what do I mean by that? Number one, on Monday, O.C. Welsh will be joining me. And on Wednesday, mayoral candidate Murray Silver will be joining me. And on Thursday, private investigator John Perry, along with a few surprises, will be joining me. Savannah, it's summertime, and it's not even summer. What can I tell you? We're going to crank it up. And I also want to make it very perfectly clear, 100% absolute. We did invite Alderman Tony Thomas to come onto the hot seat to address the issues that we're throwing in front of him. But he's gutless, spineless in my book. He has not taken the offer. So, Tony Thomas, if you're out there listening, the offer remains, but you've only got until Monday to respond. Otherwise, get ready, Savannah. You will once again be under the microscope. And with that, it is time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned, because coming up right after NPR News, Ed Till will be with you all the way till 4 o'clock. Until Monday, 6 a.m., this is Bob Williams. Take care of yourselves.